Hi, everybody. Welcome to Political Connections. I'm Ybeth Bruzual. We're just about 1 month removed from the end of the Florida legislative session. So much happened. While the halls of the Capitol are cooling down, passion for the issues that were debated and signed into law has not. One of those lawmakers joining us now, State Representative Eskamani, District 42 in Orlando. Thanks, as always, for making time out of your schedule to be with us.
Thanks for having me. Here
in studio, when we're up in Tallahassee, she always leaves the door open for us. Okay, so before we get to the session, let's talk about, your back and forth with Governor Ron DeSantis. Like it or not, he officially now is running for President of the United States. You've been very critical of him, never one to mince words. This is it. It's time to play on the national stage.
Right. I mean, this is the worst kept secret in Florida, right? We all knew this day would come. So at least finally it's here. And of course, the day he announced, he also signed a bill into law that would allow him not to resign from being governor so he can maintain his position as elected official here in the state of Florida while also run for president. And I think his launch, which was messy, to put it lightly, is another determinant of just how he is not ready for the main stage. And I do feel like it's our job, especially as Democrats, to highlight just some of the really damaging policies this governor has signed into law that are not popular, whether it's among everyday Floridians, but also across the country.
One of the things that he talked about, and I listened to it, and you're right, the very beginning of it, the first 20 plus minutes was all kinds of technical issues. Elon Musk and his workers, his employees, saying that it was the server overload because there were so many people chiming on. But anyway, one of the many topics that he did not shy away from, he meaning Governor DeSantis, was Disney. And I want to share with our viewers, one of your tweets is on screen from May 18th after Disney announced they were canceling their $1 billion Lake Nona project. Pretty blunt. Some would say, after you read the harsh assessment of the governor. Do you think this goes too far as a state legislator to use those kinds of words?
No, I don't, especially as a lawmaker that represents Orange County. I mean, it's disastrous what the governor is doing. It does not make sense to attack one of our largest employers and revenue generators. Orange County generates upwards of $332 million in tourism development tax because we're home to Walt Disney World and Universal Studios and others. And at the end of the day, Disney is continuously being attacked by the governor, not because of a tax loophole, not because of some sort of inappropriate comments, because they defended LGBTQ plus cast members and LGBTQ plus families, which is fundamental to our values here in Central Florida. And a business, just like a person, has a First Amendment right. That's fundamental in what our founding fathers wanted and what we practice every single day. And so to create an environment that not only targets one company for their First Amendment rights, but then creates a chilling effect for other businesses, it's just bad for business. And it sends a message that Florida isn't open to diverse companies, which I feel like is it's a very poor decision and poor message to send when we're trying to generate new jobs and diversify our economy.
There have been some people out there taking a look at this whole Disney debacle back and forth with DeSantis and said, you know what? Like, there was a banner saying it was going to be constructed, this campus over in Lake Nona for these 2,000 employees, but construction hadn't started. And so Disney was, some say, dragging their feet on this, and some are saying, you know what, they use this as an excuse to go ahead and pull the plug when they're already cutting about 7,000 jobs and doing some other cost-cutting measures. So what do you say to that?
If you look at the records of permitting and the conversations that Walt Disney World was having with local municipalities, including the city of Orlando, pretty clear they were moving towards making a decision. So I think that the receipts, if you will, speak for themselves. And I will say that I do think Disney was slowing down their decision because of the DeSantis drama. And my advice, really, to everyone involved, but especially the governor, is to just let it go. We should move on from this. But the challenge we face is that, Governor DeSantis has made this Disney debacle a part of his identity. It's a chapter in his book. He's up against other candidates for the Republican primary who talk about woke corporations. So he's kind of in this hole, and he has to make it out with a win. And I don't think that's going to happen, especially with the litigation that Disney has already filed.
And he did talk about it during the Twitter Spaces, and I heard the Disney reference there. We can't help it, right? I know. Okay, let's get back to the session. So much stuff passed. Many others did not. Tell me right off the bat, what are you happy with?
That's such a great question to kick it off with, because I know legislative session, most of the stories we hear about are really bad bills, and I'll be candid. I mean, there are very bad bills, and I'm still recovering from Ybeth. But on the proactive side, we were successful. For example, one of the bills that I filed is a permanent tax break on old children's diapers and adult incontinence products, and that's going to save Florida families upwards of $100 million, annually. As the ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee, it is my responsibility to push for tax breaks for consumers, also closing corporate tax loopholes. And though we weren't successful in closing loopholes, we were successful in stopping new loopholes. And of course, the $1.5 billion tax break for Floridians is a good policy.
So the diaper bill did make it?
We got it inserted into the main tax package. And so
Okay.
that was signed into law by the governor.
Okay.
And so starting July 1st, children's diapers and adult incontinence products will have no tax in Florida.
Okay, so that's good news because I know that things change, the wording changed, and things get taken out of one verbiage and added to another. So I'm glad that you set the record straight on that. That is
Absolutely.
a big deal because, as you mentioned, it covers those with the little ones and then those folks later in life who may be having some issues. And that stuff can get really expensive.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we went back and looked at your legislative history. There's so many bills to go through with you. You've sponsored and passed since 2019, mainly reference to celebration, recognition of a specific day that is like your jam. International Women's Day, you were part of that. Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month for obvious reasons. And then you go into bills, the ones that didn't die in committee. Now we're talking about budget items.
Right.
And that's where we get lost a little bit. It could get lost in the weeds because there's so much to go through that. In his vetoing some of these items, do you think it's because it was wasteful spending, or do you think he's just trying to keep you from having something to call a victory?
Yeah, it's a great question. Whenever it gets to the veto pen, and I'll say, we've secured about $7 million in local projects for District 42, and then we secured about $59 million in arts and culture funding statewide, which was strong, but unfortunately our goal is 100%, and $59 million is about 85%. And these are dollars for our nonprofits.
85%.
Thank you, I appreciate that. We always strive for 100, but it was so positive, especially working across the aisle and working with our Senate counterparts who were really hesitant to fund arts and culture funding. But that is going to go to every nonprofit that is vetted across the state of Florida. So it's going to really help our local arts and culture community as well. But to your question, vetoes are a tool by the governor to exert some sense of control and also send a message. So when it comes to the veto pen, it can kind of go both ways. I will say this governor has vetoed a lot of money out of past budgets, and it seems to be impacting every lawmaker, Democrat or Republican. I'm hopeful that Central Florida, is one of the largest revenue generators of the state, will see less vetoes. But of course, that is the power of the governor to see what he wants to do.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the bills that you were not particularly happy with, or were happy with. Let's talk about, on the flip side of that, the ones that you were not happy with.
Yeah.
And I think we should start off something you're very passionate about. So the ban here at 6 weeks when it comes to the abortion bill. You've been quite vocal about this, and you knew going into this, Republican supermajority up in Tallahassee. Do you think there'll be one day where it's outright banned altogether in Florida?
Yeah, I appreciate this question, and it is an issue very personal for me as someone, who may need an abortion one day, as 1 in 4 American women have made this decision. And of course, a 6-week abortion ban is at a point where you do not realize you're pregnant yet, which is why upwards of 7 Republicans voted no on this bill. And I think that's important to stress. This was not a party line vote. Many Republicans actually switched to our side because it's gone too far. And we already see situations under the current 15-week abortion ban where women are having to be allowed by their doctors to become more sick in the case of an unviable pregnancy because the doctor's hesitant, nervous, scared to provide a termination, even though in their best medical judgment, that should be what it is. To your question, I am fearful that next session it'll be an all-out ban, which is why there is a grassroots effort right now to get abortion access on the ballot in 2024. We're collecting petitions to do that. We need upwards of 1.3 million petitions by February to get on the 2024 ballot. But I do think our only hope in restoring reproductive rights in Florida really is to have the citizens decide. And polling tells us the majority of Floridians do support access to a safe, legal abortion. But of course, the legislature doesn't reflect those values.
How do you get, though, past the Republican roadblocks that you know are going to be there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we have no choice but to try, right? I mean, at this point, there's nothing else to lose. I mean, a 6-week abortion ban is pretty much a near total abortion ban. And so we have to pursue a citizen-led ballot initiative if we have any hope in bringing things back to a place of sanity, really, to respect those personal decisions and restore people's freedoms. I'm always concerned that the Republican legislature will try to circumvent that process, but we do have strong lawyers. The language is really finesse and focused in an effort to avoid that type of interference.
I was quickly looking through all of my papers and I found my notes. I was checking, getting ready for this show through the pewresearch.org, and they had some information from the CDC which says 58% of U.S. women who had induced abortions in 2020 was the first time they had ever had one, according to the CDC. For nearly a quarter, 24%, it was their second abortion. For 10% of women, it was the third, and for 8%, it was the fourth or higher. And the CDC figures include data from 41 states and New York City, but not the rest of New York. So I only bring this up because there has been an argument from the other side saying, oh, that could be used as just do it nilly-willy on the regular. And these numbers show that, every story is different. Everybody is personal. It really depends on the state as well. The numbers were pretty high for Florida. Your push for this is, what are you hearing from constituents on this?
Well, first of all, I think it's a misnomer to assume that women look at abortion as birth control. And in reality, based on the stats you just shared, the overwhelming majority have only experienced one abortion. For many women who face this decision, it is not only personal, but it is difficult. And it can be associated with the viability of a pregnancy, with someone's mental health, or with rape and incest. So there are so many dynamics there for us to keep in consideration. But I also would stress this is why prevention is so important. And we live in a state where we're not even wanting to fund access to contraception or comprehensive sexual health education that's age appropriate. So we're not preparing, especially young people, to understand risky behavior and how to avoid it.
And that was one of the big asterisks on this data that I found from the CDC. If the numbers would go up on contraceptives, they say research shows and analysts say that the numbers of abortion would be going down, they say.
Absolutely.
So making that accessible.
Absolutely.
All right, so much more to discuss with you. Don't go anywhere. We continue our conversation with Representative Eskamani in a moment. Time for a quick break. You're watching Political Connections. We'll be right back. And we're back here on Political Connections with State Representative Eskamani. Let's continue our conversation. House Bill 1, school choice, you voted against that. What's wrong with parents making the best choices, they say, for their kids when it comes to their education?
Well, the biggest issue that Democrats have with this policy is the fact that there's no accountability for the private schools that receive public funding. So we're talking about our taxpayer dollars, and also requirements in the state constitution that every child have access to high quality educational experience. And there's again, a misinterpretation that every private school dictates high quality. And the reality is that there was no income brackets for this either. So it's not even focused on, a family who cannot afford a private school, meaning that millionaires that don't have financial challenges would also receive this type of discount. And so we would really prefer strengthening accountability measures so that at least the private schools that receive this funding are not going to be discriminatory. If you have a child with disabilities, that private school doesn't have to follow any federal requirements to ensure that child's access is the same as others. We have schools that discriminate against LGBTQ plus people and their children. And so without that type of accountability, it's very difficult for me to feel comfortable allocating just huge fiscal towards the private sector. And of course, the other concern we have is the estimations of how many parents will tap into this, I felt like was very low. And we could be negatively impacting our public school districts with this type of shift towards privatization. Okay,
when I was up in Tallahassee, along with my producer, Gary Darling, we interviewed you in your office. I saw in the hallways roaming, I'm not at liberty to say, but, the legal teams from various school districts who were very worried and were biting their nails almost. You could see the anxiety in their eyes as they were pacing the hallways, trying to figure out their next steps, and they were not happy. They were not on board with this at all. They're, of course, on the public school side. Let's talk about immigration bills that passed. Senate Bill 1718, among other things, that makes it for a crime for a person to be driving an undocumented immigrant. You voted against that legislation, but when it comes to the bigger picture of immigration, I mean, a lot of folks would say, we just can't leave the front door open and let just everybody walk in.
Right. I mean, the front door is not open, right? I think it's important to remind people that the Biden administration has retained much of the Trump administration's immigration policies, including for the most of his term, Title 42. And we have not seen a flood of new migrants present at the border because of Title 42's end. That entire concern was really manufactured. What concerns me about this bill is, first of all, it is the federal government's responsibility to maintain immigration law, and parts of this law are so broad that it's going to affect people that have status, but could be distinguished or discriminated against as an immigrant or someone without status. We're already hearing concerns among Florida's workforce, which is made up, especially among agriculture, hospitality, construction, of immigrants. And so my concern, too, is just the ripple effect and the message this could send to our immigrant workforce, which in a state growing as fast as Florida, we desperately need.
But when you see some of those border towns like in Texas, and there's literally thousands of people on the streets, you've got the mayor of New York City also worried because folks are being transported there. He says 50% of the hotels in New York City just a few days ago are being taken up by immigrants who are coming across the border, have to be processed, and he is begging for help. So it's an issue that's very, very difficult. I'll tell you what, we're going to take another quick break. We'll be right back with our conversation with you in just a moment. We'll be right back. This is Political Connections. So many hot topics. And we're back on Political Connections. Just before the end of the school year, some special high school kids in Winter Park cashed in on politics and filmmaking. Political Connections' Greg Angel has more.
It's not a busy day.
It can be said teachers, even more than parents, can first see the potential in the next generation.
Close Premiere and then you can launch Geometrics.
Meet Michelle Washington Gerber.
I've been teaching here 10 years. This is my 10th year.
Now, her classroom is anything but a classroom, which is okay because a classroom is not where she got her start. This is Winter Park High School television.
So we had all of the, all the interview skills that we had to do versus all the technical skills. So
you said you were in film and television for a while?
Yeah, I'm from Syracuse, New York. So
and what kind of work did you do?
I was a segment producer. And then I owned my own small production company.
That experience she now brings into a classroom studio, shaping the minds and abilities of students on and off camera.
Studio stuff is studio stuff. So we like to get out in the world and get, go a little bigger.
And bigger is where they go.
The invasion is here, and every day it spreads more and more.
Americans don't believe that their interests are the ones that harm.
And native wildlife suffers because of it.
The documentaries Gerber's students produce are seen not just in the halls of Winter Park High School, but across the country.
I had no idea how to do After Effects. I had to find the clip art, and then I had to animate them going off each step. And so what I did, this was about dark money, so I actually inverted the color.
Junior Sam Birnbaum started dabbling in video editing in the 6th grade.
Just for fun. It kind of helps stimulate my political interest, which is a big thing. I'm really interested in activism and politics.
So it's no surprise that's a topic Sam chose when he and his classmates were given an assignment to produce a documentary as part of a C-SPAN contest. The question posed,
if you're a newly elected member of Congress, what's the first issue you would address and why? Yeah.
Follow the money.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think a big problem is that people don't trust government.
Money.
Sam set out to answer why cash is so crucial in campaigns.
Money. Each time your local congressman runs for office, they're spending money, and a lot of it.
He lined up interviews with politicians and experts, dug deep into the data and research.
Raising less money than your opponent puts you at an inherent disadvantage.
And he found something he didn't expect.
So my aha moment was kind of a full 180 in my film of it's actually an important part of the political system and our participation in it.
Sam's documentary also puts front and center just how focused the next generation is on today's critical issues.
Another crisis lurks beneath the surface, hidden from most and dangerous to all. The invasion is already here. The question is, can we stop it?
Classmates Blaine Miller and Annabelle Newsom found Florida is an epicenter within a global crisis.
It's a difficult and complex problem, but maybe this will help.
This glass of water represents a healthy, functioning ecosystem filled with plants and animals that belong. This food coloring represents species from a different ecosystem. When I introduce a drop of the food coloring, it disturbs the water and ripples. Given enough time, the food coloring spreads, integrating itself into the water. Now let's try to get the food coloring out. As you can see, I can't remove the food coloring without also taking out the water.
That's why invasive species are such a difficult problem, because they integrate themselves into an ecosystem and continue to spread.
We talked to Professor Shirley Baker in Gainesville at University of Florida. She had mentioned how invasive species can interact with other environmental issues, and I had never really thought of that before.
Inspired by their interest in zoology and psychology, the pair spent months doing interviews and research, drove hours crisscrossing the state.
Aquatic plants and animals can be trapped inside the water ballast of ships and can be released thousands of miles away in new waters.
For all of their work, Blaine, Annabelle, and Sam were awarded second-place prizes in C-SPAN's National StudentCam contest. Their take-home prize includes $1,500, and their documentaries airing nationally on C-SPAN. But there's also another payoff. Knowing their work is giving their generation a voice in the conversation.
I feel like our documentary can help show that anyone can really make a difference, no matter how old you are. And I think that this puts into perspective that young people, I feel like a lot of older people think young people are not really as mature as them, but I think that this helps show that we do know what's going on in the world and we can make a difference.
A difference in the world for the world.
So I hope it reminds them that even though we might not be able to vote, that we still have a voice and that we still want to be represented.
Putting to use lessons learned in this classroom, celebrating newfound knowledge and their success.
Our end of the year party is very popular.
That's the real reason.
That's the real reason everybody works so hard on this.
In Winter Park, Greg Angel, Spectrum News.
These kids, they're doing incredible work. Tell me how you are encouraged by seeing these young people and what they're doing.
Oh, it's incredibly encouraging. You know, I've been attending the commencement ceremonies of all of our high school graduates in the district, and it's just not only is the energy palpable, but this is the next generation, and the fact that they're already engaged in civics is a really big deal.
It is a big deal, and you are also engaging with them because I tap into your Facebook Lives and you're commenting yourself, not your staff pointing you to them. So you are also very involved. Well, that's pretty encouraging to see them and to actually catch up with you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for this edition of Political Connections. Our thanks as always to State Representative Anna Eskamani. I'm Ybeth Bruzual. On behalf of our entire production team, including Gary Darling, we'll see you next week right here on Political Connections.